Hi, everyone. Welcome to our channel. Douglas Macgregor warns that the United States and Western Europe face a serious risk of a clash with Russia, potentially leading to nuclear escalation. He stresses that the current situation is more perilous than anything seen since 1963, emphasizing the lack of readiness compared to that time. According to Macgregor, this marks a critical juncture in U.S. and Western civilization's history. Yes, he believes that if the current course of action continues, there's a significant risk of drawing Russian forces into conflict. This could initially involve conventional weaponry, but might swiftly escalate to nuclear confrontation, especially if both Russia and the United States become directly involved. He also argues that those making these decisions fail to grasp the gravity of their actions. They seem to operate under the illusion that they possess complete strategic dominance, which isn't the case. For instance, damaging Russia's early warning radar system sends a clear message that a nuclear attack could be imminent, jeopardizing in many hopes of maintaining a peaceful relationship. This misstep signals to Russia that the U.S. may be willing to escalate to nuclear warfare regardless of actual intentions. Ultimately, the concern lies not in what the U.S. intends, but in how Russia perceives its intentions and actions. Well, there's a group of politicians in Western Europe and the United States who belong to a broader globalist faction, and they perceive their authority to be under threat. Many European governments are facing serious doubts about their longevity due to the significant harm caused to their own populations. This isn't solely because of Nord Stream 2, but also due to the detrimental effects of various sanctions which have led to increased unemployment and damaged industrial capacity across Europe. Similarly, in the United States, the current administration and its affiliates are unlikely to retain power beyond November. Their policies, such as loosening border controls, have stirred up trouble, and some seem to believe that provoking a conflict with Russia, which they erroneously believe they can manage, is a strategy to cling to power. This mindset appears prevalent not only in Washington, but also in London, Paris, and Berlin. However, it's a perilous and misguided approach that may have the opposite effect of what they intend. It could hasten their removal from power instead of securing it. It's important to understand that if the decision is made to deploy our forces alongside some European allies into western Ukraine, it wouldn't involve a sizable ground force. However, our air power would undoubtedly be a crucial component in supporting and safeguarding targeting them. This emphasis on air power stems from its far greater significance compared to ground forces. Ground forces, in reality, don't pose a significant threat to the Russians. They not only outnumber us, but are also seasoned and ready for combat, unlike our relatively experienced troops. While our forces are diverse and lack unified command and effort, the Russians operate with cohesion and efficiency. When it comes to air superiority, it's arguably our strongest advantage as we outnumber Russian aircraft by a significant margin in theater. Nevertheless, overcoming their integrated air defenses won't be simple, and it's uncertain whether the Russians would allow us to deploy our air power without resistance. The reason for highlighting this is the significant presence of F-15s. These aircraft, with their nuclear capabilities, are well known to the Russians. President Putin and others have previously noted the F-15's capacity to carry nuclear weapons. Seeing a large number of F-15s could lead the Russians to assume they're armed with nuclear weapons. Such an assumption might prompt the Russians to resort to tactical nuclear weapons, possibly targeting airfields and locations where the F-15s operate from. In essence, there's considerable uncertainty about our intentions, which could prompt the Russians to take preemptive action. Why risk waiting for F-15s to potentially deploy nuclear weapons when they could launch missiles with tactical nuclear warheads, effectively neutralizing logistics bases, airfields, and airports across a wide geographic range? Russia. While conventional warheads are also an option, the sight of numerous F-15s might lead Russian observers to conclude they're carrying nuclear payloads. This underscores the folly of attempting to support the Ukrainian regime in Kiev, which lacks popular support and military loyalty, making it a misguided endeavor. Now, it's crucial to understand that both Americans and Europeans have been fed a constant stream of falsehoods regarding the origins of this conflict. Even now, Western media outlets continue to propagate the narrative that the Russian intervention in eastern Ukraine was unprovoked. However, as myself, Dr. Mearsheimer, and numerous others have emphasized repeatedly, this couldn't be further from the truth. Prime Minister Orbán of Hungary and other heads of state, including those of India and China, have also echoed this sentiment. The reality is that every effort was made to provoke the Russians into action, and they eventually responded out of fear of the serious threat posed by US and eastern Ukraine. Now, the ENS clearly supports their concerns, from the presence of biolabs to missile deployments and the formidable buildup of the Ukrainian army, all geared toward attacking and targeting Russians. Despite claims of this war being a beneficial endeavor because it claims Russian lives, the grim truth is that while perhaps 50,000 Russians have perished, over 600,000 Ukrainians have lost their lives. This entire situation has been a disastrous failure, but acknowledging it as such is inconceivable for Washington, as it would cause the collapse of the larger deceitful narratives they've constructed. The politicians in Western Europe and the United States understand that their survival hinges on maintaining these illusions. Well, it seems that a few days ago, there was an attack using hypersonic missiles, though I'm not certain if they were Kinjal or Skyfall missiles. They targeted an area near Laval, just a few miles from the Polish border, where approximately 100 or more individuals were killed, including NATO and Ukrainian officers among a group of 300, the casualties among U.S. military personnel, including at least one Army general, have not been officially acknowledged, as it aligns with the overarching narrative that we're not as involved as we truly are. The choice of targets served three purposes. Firstly, it demonstrated that the Russians are well aware of the situation in Ukraine, including the locations of U.S. and Allied forces, as well as the remaining Ukrainian presence. Secondly, it signaled their capability to not only identify but also destroy these targets. Finally, by utilizing hypersonic missiles which travel at speeds 10 times faster than sound, they unequivocally prove that our defenses are incapable of intercepting them. Despite some persisting allusions to the contrary, recent reports from institutions like the USI in London have highlighted the stark reality that our air defense capabilities in Europe, both American and European, can only safeguard a mere 5% of the military infrastructure. This underscores our vulnerability. Our ground forces are insufficient and exposed, while our air power, though formidable, faces significant challenges in penetrating Russian defenses. There's a growing concern that any attempt to assert dominance could escalate to nuclear confrontation. Essentially, the message from the Russians is clear: they won't wait to see what weapons we deploy against them. Any aggressive move will be met with decisive action, plunging us into war with Russia. Yes, it's indeed highly perilous. One of the primary reasons for the Russian intervention in eastern Ukraine was their concern that we might deploy missiles along with radars and other supporting equipment in that region. Such a move could potentially enable us to target their nuclear deterrent capabilities within a matter of minutes, not only endangering Russian cities, but also their nuclear arsenal. This isn't new information. It simply reinforces the initial point. We're entering a situation where the Russians might feel compelled to take defensive measures which could involve the use of tactical nuclear weapons against targets in Eastern Europe. The ramifications of such actions are unpredictable, but if we respond by alerting our own nuclear forces, it becomes a dangerous game of use it or lose it. A similar scenario occurred in 1973 during the conflict between Israel, Egypt, and Syria, where Kissinger and Schlesinger decided, without consulting Nixon,